What's up guys, Chris Schwartz-Edmisten here from Schwartz-Edmisten Web Design. In today's video I want to look at aligning the blog posts to the rest of the content on the site. And this is something that I recently reached out to support about. So hopefully they will be fixing this issue, but I also want to provide the CSS solution in the meantime because they gave their usual response of, there's no guarantee that we can implement this fix, but we'll pass it on to our engineering team. So for now we have to use CSS to fix this. So the reason that the content doesn't line up, well, first of all, right now I have it set to full width, so it just extends to the full width of the site. So I want to set it to inset. So let's go ahead and click our pencil icon on this section, and I'm going to set it to inset. And strangely enough, when you set it to inset, it doesn't line up with the rest of the content on the site. Like you would think when you set it to inset, it would just match, but it doesn't. It's way more inside, like there's way more space on the edges, and it forces everything inside too much. So how do we get it to align with the rest of the content on the site? Well, the reason that it doesn't line up is because they're calculating the width and the padding differently between regular sections and between the blog list. So if I go to the content wrapper class in this first section, I'm hovering over this section here, you can see it highlighted on the left. And if I come down here, we can see that there's this content wrapper, and this is the container that houses all of the content in this section, and it's what gets the max width on it. And the max width is whatever you set the site width to be in the site styles. So if I go to settings and then spacing, we have this page width max, and you can see I've set it to 1365 pixels. And then we also have the site margin here of 6 viewport width units. So those two settings are both reflected on this container element. So if I inspect the page again, we can, I'll come up here to the regular section again. And on the content wrapper, you can see we have the max width set of 1365. And then the padding on the left and the right, the site margin, is 6 viewport widths. So here, when I highlight over this element, you can see the padding in green and then the margin in orange. And so you can see where the green and the orange is on this container. But then when I come down to the next section and we hover over this container here that houses the blog items, you can see the green and the orange are in completely different places. So immediately, like, something stuck out to me and I'm like, this isn't right. The width isn't being calculated the same. And it all comes down to one property. And the property that's different is this box sizing of border box. So when an element has a box sizing of border box, it means that its padding is being included in its width. So here you can see that the content plus the green area equals the maximum width of the site. Whereas up here on this container, the content comes all the way out. The padding isn't included inside of that calculation. So it'll make more sense. I've set up a little example here to show the difference between a box sizing of border box and a box sizing of content box. And I can show you real quick that this content wrapper has a box sizing of content box, whereas this wrapper has a box sizing of border box. So the difference is here we have two identical containers. They both have a width of 200 pixels and a height of 100 pixels. You can see that here, identical right now. So we'll give the first container a box sizing of content box and nothing changes. But when I give this container a box sizing of border box, the padding is going to be included in that width calculation. So it's effectively going to be smaller. So this width of 200 pixels is including this padding of 20 pixels. So the actual width of the element itself is now 160 pixels as opposed to 200 pixels. So here we can see the actual width of the element, 160, plus 20 pixels of padding on the left and 20 pixels of padding on the right. So the box sizing property includes the padding in its width calculation. The content box sizing property excludes it. So this is a 200 pixel wide element and the padding is not included in that 200 pixels. So that's why our two containers don't match up. The padding is not being included in the width here, and the padding is being included in the width here. So it's always going to be smaller, just like our blue box will always be smaller than our green box. Doesn't matter what their widths are. So the way to fix this is to essentially just make sure they're both calculated the same. We need to give this blog list a box sizing of content box. So I'm going to right click on this container and it brings me right to it here in my inspect tools. And I'm just going to copy the styles here that for this element that has the box sizing of border box. So here we can see there's two different elements that are being targeted. There's a collection content wrapper, and here we can see that's the class for the blog list, but there's also a gallery content wrapper, and I'm not exactly sure what element this is targeting because I've tested this out with a gallery, and galleries don't have gallery content wrappers. I didn't try all the galleries, so maybe one of them does. But just to be safe, I don't want to also target this element. I only want to target this first element because this is the element that affects the blog list. So I'm just going to copy this first line up here of selectors. So within the page section, here we have the class of page section. We're targeting the collection content wrapper. So I'm just going to paste that in. I'll open up my curly brackets and I'm going to give this a box sizing of content box. And now I'm going to reload the frame and that should update my images and everything. And now you can see that the blog posts are extending to the full width. So they're now lining up. But if I go ahead and I shrink down the screen size a little bit, you can see that they're still overflowing, like the width isn't being calculated properly. And the best way that I've found to deal with that is we just have to set the width to unset. So we basically have to unset the original width property, and that seems to fix the issue. So now if I go ahead and full screen and go down to smaller screen sizes, you can see that the blog posts are always in line with the rest of the content when set to inset. So that seems to be the best fix right now. So if you're having this issue, you can go ahead and use this CSS to correct that issue, and it'll then calculate the blog list the same as it's calculating all the other content on the site, and it'll be aligned. All right, I hope that was helpful and you gleaned some learning from it. At the very least, you can copy and paste the CSS in the blog post below into your site, and this will no longer be a problem. Hopefully in the future, Squarespace fixes this. It's kind of a joke that, this is still a problem. But I will also be adding this CSS to my course, Squarespace CSS Toolbox. It's a library of CSS snippets specifically for 7.1 to get more out of your 7.1 sites. So if you're interested in that course, you can check that out in the description below as well. All right, that's it for me, guys. I'll see you in the next one.